You know, when you look at a legendary fighter plane like the Messerschmitt Bf 109, it's so easy to just focus on the sleek lines, the cannons, the whole package. But the real story, the absolute heart of its power and its problems, is hidden right under the cowling. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into. We are talking about the Daimler-Benz 605. This was the beast of an engine that powered most of Germany's iconic Bf 109 fighters all through the second half of World War II. It was powerful, it was technologically way ahead of its time, and, as we're about to see, it was, well, dangerously flawed. So right off the bat, you've got to understand the raw power we're dealing with here. This number, 1,475 horsepower, that was just its initial rating. Back in 1942, that was a staggering amount of power to cram into a fighter, and it gave German pilots a serious edge. So, how did they pull that off? All right, that brings us to our first big point. This thing really was a marvel for its time. I mean, the DB605 represented the absolute peak of piston engine technology. Okay, so let's get a little technical for a second. It's a 12-cylinder engine, sure, but the really key feature here is its inverted V setup. This was a classic German design trick. See, by flipping the engine's cylinder banks upside down, they could mount the whole thing lower in the plane's nose. This gave the pilot way better visibility, which, as you can imagine, is a huge advantage in a dogfight. Now, here's something really important to get. The 605 wasn't a totally brand new design. It was a masterful evolution of its predecessor, the DB601, which was already a success. The engineers basically took that existing engine block and just pushed every single part to its absolute breaking point. They bored out the cylinders, cranked up the RPMs, slapped on a more powerful supercharger. It was a masterclass in squeezing every last drop of power from a design they already knew. But yeah, all that power, it came at a massive price. This was a high-stakes gamble, and it created this fundamental, dangerous conflict right at the heart of the engine. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This is a direct quote from Germany's own air ministry. They knew, right from the horse's mouth, that they had a problematic engine on their hands. Its incredible power was matched only by its, frankly, shocking unreliability. And the fallout from this rush design? It was brutal. The 605 was infamous for just bursting into flames for no reason, or for crankshafts that would seize up solid in the middle of a flight. A huge part of the problem was the switch from high-quality ball bearings to these cheaper plain bearings. This wasn't really a choice, though. Allied bombing had absolutely crippled Germany's ball bearing factories, forcing a design compromise that ended up being fatal for a lot of engines and the pilots flying. But believe it or not, the story doesn't stop there. Even with all these deadly flaws, the demand from the front lines for even more power was relentless. To get there, German engineers came up with some incredibly innovative, you might even say desperate, boosting systems. The most famous of these was the MW50. Basically, think of it like a shot of adrenaline for the engine. They'd inject this methanol water mix, which would instantly cool down the air being shoved into the engine. This let them run insane amounts of pressure without the whole thing just tearing itself apart. For a pilot, this was like hitting the nitro button, a critical power boost right when you needed it most. And just look at the results. That standard 1,475 horsepower could be boosted to a massive 1,800. The late war versions could even hit 2,000 horsepower. But, and this is a huge but, there was a catch. You could only use this emergency power for about 10 minutes at a time before you basically risk blowing up that already fragile engine. Okay, so we've got this incredible yet deeply flawed piece of machinery. But an engine is only half the story, right? A complex machine like this is just one piece of the puzzle. Now we've got to talk about the other half of the equation, the human element. And that really brings us to the heart of it all. I mean, you can have the most powerful, most advanced engine in the world, but is that really enough to win a war? So let's start with the German pilots. Back in 1941, every single Luftwaffe pilot was a volunteer, hand-picked for the job. By the time they got to the front lines, they had at least 250 hours of flight time under their belt. We're talking everything from advanced aerobatics to combat tactics. These guys were seasoned pros before they even saw their first real fight. Now, compare that to their main opponents on the Eastern Front. Because of the desperate situation, new Soviet pilots were being rushed to the front with as little as 8 to 10 hours of solo flight time. 8 to 10 hours! They could barely take off and land, let alone fight. The gap in experience wasn't just big, it was an absolute chasm.
And this wasn't just about stick and rudder skills, it was baked right into their tactics. The Germans fought in flexible pairs, with radios in every single plane, which allowed them to adapt and take the initiative. The Soviets, on the other hand, were often stuck flying in these rigid, tight formations of three. With no radios, they had to stay glued to their leader to see hand signals, which basically made them sitting ducks for the German hunters diving in from above.
Okay, so let's put it all together now. This isn't just a story about a powerful engine, and it isn't just a story about skilled pilots. It's all about how those two things, the pilot and the plane, came together. And this is really the key takeaway. The Luftwaffe's early dominance wasn't just because of the DB605 engine. It was because they put a technologically superior, even if it was flawed, aircraft into the hands of a superbly trained pilot who was empowered by a much better tactical system. It was that combination, that synthesis of man and machine, that was so devastating. So, at the end of the day, what's the big lesson here? It's that victory in the air is never just about who has more planes or more horsepower. It's a complex formula. It's the right tech, combined with the best training and the most effective tactics, that really creates the winning edge. And that really leaves us with one final question, something to think about. As technology gets more and more advanced, we're talking stealth fighters, drones, artificial intelligence, does this lesson from the past still ring true? In today's world, with all our advanced tech, what do you think weighs more? The technology or the training?